Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Magic Mics, proudly sponsored by CoolStuffing.com, Alter Sleeves, as well as Twitch subscribers and Patreon supporters, just like yourself, which we appreciate. My name is Evan, or when we get started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, MTG Nerd Girl.
Hey guys, welcome back.
Ruben Bressler.
Hey, Happy New Year. First show of the year.
First show of the year. Wouldn't be a Magic Mics if I couldn't blurble right out of the gate. That's just how I roll here. If you missed our pre-show, subscribers to this channel get access to our NSFW version early. And with that, we kick it off with our first pick in our giveaway. Get your chance at $50 worth of anything at CoolStuffing.com by typing !raffle in the chat. But subscribe first to get 2 chances to win and support your favorite streamer with your suggestions at the end of the show to see who we rate tonight. That is thanks to our sponsor, CoolStuffing.com, where you can find cool stuff in stock every single day. I'm going to be honest. It's a bit of a slow one this week. All right, everybody. We're not going to have, the most incredible news stories from the end of the year because it's the end of the year.
We haven't had a live show in 3 weeks, and
it's true.
We have about a week's worth of news from those 3 weeks.
We're pulling together what we can. All right. And so for the first pick this week, I thought it was interesting. There was some notes here on the Blogatog. This is the markrosewater.tumblr.com blog that he runs. And he talks to, various people who are asking questions. And there's a lot of people who just complain endlessly about the number of products and the products and products and products. And there's just too many products. And so he says, look, we're at a flex point, which I thought was interesting. A flex point is a moment in the life cycle of a product where the product is used, goes through a transition. Flex points are usually a result of product evolving to match the needs of its audience or the technology of making it. And so for years, they tried to make Magic a certain way. They put focus on certain ways to play. Magic is about standard. We'll make standard level sets. They'll sanction standard. They'll shine a light on competitive play using standard. And so eventually they realized if we better reflected what the audience was doing, then maybe they'll make the products that they're kind of looking for and what they want. And the result, was a gigantic success. This is where, more Commander products. This is where the crazy old variants, the collector packs and stuff came into there. So now we're at a flex point, y'all. And we certainly have seen since Eldraine till today that Magic has gone on a crazy trajectory. I mean, having played and covered Magic for a very long time, the last 4 or 5 years have been absolutely insane.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I do agree that there's a lot of people complaining about that, and there's also a lot of people who love all of the new products. So it's a tough one to know what is the correct direction for Wizards.
Yeah.
So what's the takeaway?
Well, I think this is really cool. This was a really cool takeaway, I thought, which was, when way back in the day, in 1993, Richard Garfield was like, wouldn't it be cool when you sit down to play a game of Magic, you're not sure what the other person may or may not have in their deck. Now, immediately everyone bought every card they could and tried to get 4 of everything they could and so on and so forth. But now, 30 plus years later, or almost 30 years technically, we're at a point where I legitimately will see cards on social media I have never seen in my life. And I'm telling you, it's part of my job to read these freaking Magic cards and to try to keep up with it. And so it is kind of cool that you would sit down and play a Commander game or whatever at a Command Fest or something and just be legitimately surprised at what the hell they just played. Like, I think that's kind of awesome.
I mean, that is a decent argument to have, but I also feel like it's a curling a finger on a monkey's paw argument. Like, I think that with Unfinity the unsets are much more in line with what Richard Garfield intended with what Magic the Gathering is than a Pro Tour, right? Like, I don't think the cutthroat competitive thing is what Richard Garfield intended, but it's what we got. And so I don't necessarily make a value judgment about which is better and which is worse. So I think that there's a lot of reasons why having this many cards is better. And one of them is the what's the word I'm looking for? The fun factor of like, oh, I've never seen that before. How neat. That's cool. I've had that experience at the commander table a few times. But the flip side of it is you're overloading people who do need to know what all the cards do. I'm speaking here specifically of the judges, the people who call themselves professionals or competitive players, the people who make content. And also you're overloading the designers with having to churn out more and more and more product. So I don't think it's necessarily 100% good or bad. It is a fact, and it is a direction that they're moving in. But I'm not smart enough nor studied enough to know whether it's sustainable or whether it's better.
I think that I'm okay with it. I wish that there was a clearer dividing line. I like the idea of keeping up with Premier sets and having Premier sets feed into Standard feeding into Pioneer and Modern and so on. I wish that all of these supplemental sets, all these precons, Unfinity, things like that are coming out off of the map path for those formats. I wish those would just only be legal in casual formats like Commander. So I agree with Ruben with like, oh, that's neat. I saw this card today. I didn't see it. It's a cool thing that would work good in my combo deck, yada, yada, yada. I don't feel like we should be having that happen in Modern, in Legacy, I don't really want those things there for me personally. So I do wish that we had a little bit more of a distinct thing. I wish that they weren't trying to double dip by printing competitive cards that you need 4 of in Modern in a random precon. Like, that's just not a thing I think that they should do. But I mean, yeah, it sells 4 precons to every competitive player, sure.
They haven't done that in a long time, and I don't think that was sort of their goal there. I think if they've also put stuff like that, like in Jumpstart, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, there's Unfinity cards happening in Legacy right now. There's like all sorts of random janky stuff going on in Constructed.
Oh, yeah.
There's also modern, straight to modern sets, like the Lord of the Rings set that's coming later this year. Hopefully, here's my hope. Hopefully they saw what they did to Modern and they go, we're not doing that to Pioneer. That's my hope, is that they don't print straight to Pioneer sets.
I don't think he kind of meant for it to be interpreted this way so much, but I do think it's interesting to note that he was like, we were all about standard, shine a light on Standard. And Standard these days, for all intents and purposes, is dead. And I mean, like it's on the table and the line and the beep is in the background. It's hurting. And while there's plenty of Standard being played on the digital clients, particularly Arena, in the real world, Commander and Pioneer Plus rules all. So, for knowing how I've heard Wizards talk about the importance of Standard sets, the importance of the most recent set doing well versus the idea that they create more curated sets, more sets with Commander focused and casual focused cards in them, so that they can basically, they now have this whole market out here that they're kind of discovering, because a competitive Magic player was a little tiny slice of the pie, as it turns out, and the more casual means it might be better for them to not focus on Standard. If Standard kind of goes away in stores, is that the worst thing in the world? Right? Like, if Pioneer still exists and Modern still exists, and those are still very popular to this day, we still see attendance. People will show up for Pioneer and Modern.
So I'm going to give you you may already know this, but I did a research, I did a PowerPoint on this. So I'm going to go a little bit into a PowerPoint on what the purpose of the invention of Standard was for. And Magic was made and became very popular and was at risk of becoming a fad. And the cards started getting too expensive and people couldn't keep up with the old cards, even though new cards were being printed. So Wizards, in order to sustain the longevity of their game and not become a fad, created a format and said that we are going to support this format more than any other. We're going to put our own money and our own energy into it, and it's going to feature cards from the last year and a half to 2 years, and we're going to call it Type 2. And everything else can be played in Type 1. And Type 2 eventually became what we know of as Standard. And that was to protect the longevity of Magic. Do we need to protect the longevity of Magic anymore? I think that's the big question beneath, do we need Standard?
I think absolutely.
I agree. And so that's why it's so strange that Wizards is sort of leaving after 25 years this thing that sustained it. Standard saved Magic, or Type 2 saved Magic from becoming a fad. And now we have all of these other ways to play, and all these other ways to play are great, but we don't have that tentpole format where new cards go. We have Commander, but that's not a format where new cards go. Commander doesn't necessarily drive individual sales of new sets. Pioneer kind of does. Modern kind of does.
I don't know if I believe you on that last one.
You need 4 cards. You need more cards for Standard. You need one of any given card. Like how many cards from each set are in your Commander decks? 1, 2, maybe 3 per deck. Whereas in Standard, you're getting 20 plus lands at least, for your 5 Commander decks.
I think
or for Standard decks.
Evan's argument here is that the product is still moving. So your Logic Standard is dead. Who's buying the product? So it is still happening. People are still buying the things.
Right. I think there's an amount of limited play, I think, that's out there happening, draft and sealed and stuff. And there is no bigger loop that I've ever been thrown from when the pandemic happened and sales increased. How did we not, we tied our anchor onto, constructed Magic is important. The constructed competitive, at least leaning for, competitive is important. And when that was all taken away, card sales went up, and that just blew everyone's mind, certainly mine.
Well, collectibles all exploded during the pandemic.
It's true.
So people had more money and things. That makes sense.
More time.
People were spending less on gas. They had more time, and they wanted their comfort food. And Magic is a comfort food. Magic always goes up during hard times because it's a comfort food.
Yeah, there's a bit here coming that we're going to talk about that more in depth.
So I think the biggest issue is that the cost to entry is too high with older formats. Standard is meant to keep the cost of entry low. So back when I was a kid, there's no way in freaking hell any of the kids I knew's parents would dump hundreds and thousands of dollars into a game that their kid could play. That's just not a thing anymore. That was not a thing then. So now Wizards has completely redirected their focus into the 30 and 40-year-old whales that have expendable income. And we are lapping it up. As quickly as they can produce the product, we are buying it. However, the amount of new people getting into the game is drastically going to depend on whether or not our generations, the 30 and the 40-something, will spend that much money on decks. Dana Fisher, for example, her dad is very into this game and bought her these cards so she can play in competitive Modern. That would not have been the case when I was young for any of us. So it's going to be up to the parents to now buy these very, very expensive decks to get their kids into this thing, because it's not a game a kid can go into a card store without a parent who has a substantial amount of disposable income to buy them and get them into this game. I went to Mox the other night. I've said this on the channel before. They had 2 events going for Friday Night Magic: a $250 buy-in draft double masters and legacy, and that was the only thing going on for F&M.
Right,
that is very affable neighborhood, is what that sounds like.
And what?
And it's just downtown Portland. It's just Portland, and I could never play. No parent, you know what I mean? Like, the youngest person there had to have been 25 years old.
And what you're describing is what Magic wanted to avoid in 1994 when they created Standard or they created Type 2.
Right.
They wanted to prevent it from being a opulent game. They didn't want it to be only for people who could barely afford it.
But they also created the entire Friday Night Magic program, and the idea that this was the day you go play. This was the format that you play. This is the promos that have F&M on them, so it all ties together. And over time, that's gotten more and more diluted. Now the seasons for qualifying for Pro Tours don't need to be the same format as the Pro Tour because stores complained. There's no more F&M promos. There's just promo packs. With nothing actually branded on the day and the night you want to be there. And so and between that and the pandemic, man, Standard is just not there. And so I think you just lean into Commander.
I want kids to be able to play Magic without needing their parents to bankroll them to get into it, and have parents who play the game. I walked into a card store and someone was like, hey, play D&D with us. And I was like, great, what are you guys playing over there? And they were like, oh, this is Magic. You should come on Friday. So I went on Friday and I bought a Judgment mono white deck for $9.99, and I slowly upgraded it with buying packs one at a time, one per week that I could afford. Like, literally, you cannot start playing Magic that way.
No, those days are long gone, and they've not made it sort of easy in that way. And then we kind of circle back around to the event decks and things. So either way, very interesting. We've been over it a few times. Let's move on here out of the first pick to Gather the Townsfolk, where Rosewater was talking a little bit about the success of Unfinity. And Unfinity, at least out of the gate, they know it didn't do great. Unsets tend to have better legs, so the product can still come around. He says, what's the most popular unset? It's Unstable. And he mentioned that, he says, someone says they're confused. You said Unfinity was more successful in sales than Unstable. And he says, yes, the player base has grown by considerably since Unstable's release. I'd also note that Unfinity had collector boosters. Unfinity was juiced with Shocklands. So and the galaxy foils of those Shocklands and, the other cool lands that were in it. So there's a whole bunch of products that made the Unfinity set very successful. But I still think there's arguments about putting silver bordered cards into black bordered formats, where we were talking about Legacy, and not only are they suffering under Initiative, they're suffering under stickers.
Yeah. The stickers were a fascinating experiment. And on the one hand, I'm happy they tried them. On the other hand, they are the reason why the set was delayed from April 1st, because the company that was originally going to print the original stickers went out of business. And they're kind of a nightmare to track. Like, I'm not as young as I used to be, and it's hard enough for me to read the text on cards. I can't be bothered to see which of your creatures has hats. Like, that's a very old man Magic opinion of me. I quite enjoyed Unfinity, and the story is very fun, and I like that they did it, but it is kind of a nightmare. In addition to the fact that they put cards that are legal in Magic legal formats like Legacy and Vintage in the sets in order to try to juice sales. It was kind of a mess, but I appreciate what they were going for.
Yeah, I dig the unsets. They're cool. They're neat. They're interesting. Someone did note and or claim that at Magic 30 they did play against Mark Rosewater, who did play a Mind Goblin. Thought that
Great.
That was very cute.
Good for them.
You don't get that every day. That's a whole story you get to keep and take with you. But yeah, again, I think a larger player base, a collector booster, they juiced it more than they juiced the other unset, really.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you're going to see more sales.
The other thing to me is, like, Magic has gotten to a point with its non-unsets where it's not taking itself too seriously anymore. We've said several times on the show, at least I have, that Magic is at its best when it doesn't take itself as seriously as it once did. And so how different is it that we have Space Carnival? How different is Space Carnival than Cat Mobsters? Right? Like, where on the scale of unrealistic and silly is the difference between Neon Kamigawa and, actual Dungeons and Dragons worlds and a scientist augmenting animals onto other animals? Like, the lines have blurred so significantly, which is good. I think that it's great that Magic doesn't take itself as seriously as it once did. I was kind of over the overly dour, like,
slow down pop song,
yeah, I don't need Untitled by Hoobastank to play every Magic set. So I like it slightly better that they're a little bit more tongue in cheek now. But with that said, there you go. Anyway.
Well, thank you so much to Amanda Traders for the donation of $100. That was incredible.
Wow.
Thank you so
Amazing.
much. We do very much
Mana
appreciate that.
Traders.
Yeah. Woo! Fantastic.
Incredible.
We may or may not have more to do with those wonderful people in the future.
Okay, great.
Not that there's anything wrong with
Spoiler
that.
alert.
That's
They're at least a sponsor of this episode.
There you go. So
Yeah.
yeah, so Mark Rosewater on Unfinity is neat. Yeah, that's a whole thing. I'm curious because again, they released it the same day as 40K. Like
Right.
the 40K, we can't print it fast enough 40K, right? Like that was, I don't know who thought that was a good idea. Why? I don't know.
Well, it wasn't the original intention.
No, and if anything, why would you want to double up on a giant release like 40K to fight with anything? You know, there's only so many dollars in Magic players' pockets. Like,
yeah, I didn't know that the 40K. I didn't think the 40K thing would be as big as it was for Magic players.
Sure.
I thought that the 40K fans would buy it.
Then they made all the cards great.
Like, and then it turns out all the cards were great.
Yeah, and then the decks are like, you know,
fantastic.
They're closer to what I would see sitting down with a bunch of like homebrew decks,
right,
power level wise, than I would be to like any sort of precon. And I'm wondering if precons are starting to lean that way as well, because also the Dominaria United seemed a little bit more on the juiced side as well. So I'm wondering if we're just going to be getting like higher value cards, because I think we're getting to the point where it's like, are these precon decks worth it? Because so much of the community has already bought them that like, I have 10 other precons. Why do I need this new one? Well, the answer now is they're more powerful.
I mean, like they're going to make Lord of the Rings commander decks. I'm sure the Frodo deck is going to be dope, right? Like, I don't know. I hope it's fun. It seems silly. But yeah, I mean, put the good cards in there. I'm okay with that. Wizards actually makes a level 7, deck power level. And it just didn't tell anybody. I don't know. But yeah, I know they didn't want 40K to fail. Not only did they not want it to fail in terms of like flavor and make sure they got that stuff right, but also they want to make decks that people are excited to buy. And by God, it came together because it's working. As we move on to Desperate Ravens, you can check out our altar sleeves. Support the show by using the code MagicMikes to check out for 5% off anything in the store, including a set of exclusive sleeves featuring the Magic Mikes crew at altersleeves.com/MagicMikes. Tell them we sent you.
I just realized that they're going to have an ability called Fellowship.
Yes.
Where you can probably play them as partners or something.
Yay. It's going to be wonderful. All right. So this came across the Twitter wires that I read. It was there's a blog online from Desert Sky Games that was talking a little bit about, literally titled "The World Coming Down," where he talked about the singles and particularly Magic singles losing value, and their entire collections losing value, and if they had sold sooner they would have made more, and so on and so forth, and how it's affecting other games and whatnot, but he thinks Magic in particular, and to me I don't really see it. I think this is a lot of doom and gloom. I think what is happening is what you call the course correction. I want you to go to Google, and I want you to type in Bitcoin, all right? And I want you to look at the past 5 years, because they let you see 5 years.
I'm not going to do that.
And it'll go woo, and then it'll go woo, and that'll be it. It'll go up and it'll go down. And what happened over the last 2 years was everyone lost their mind. I don't know if you were there or if you hung out. I made money off a dog coin at one point. Like, you know how insane that sounds? Like,
it's pronounced Doge.
I know, but the whole point was it was ridiculous and silly, and at some point just a crazy rigged game for everyone who was trying to even play it. And in the middle of it, everyone was like hanging out, going nuts in their homes, and we're like, hey, collectibles are cool. I like games that are collectibles. Put them together. Let's go. Pokemon exploded. Everything exploded. And everything is regressing back to the mean. And that's not a horrible, terrible thing. But yes, the reserve list has come back to reality. A lot of the singles have come back to reality. That doesn't mean Magic's dying. That doesn't mean the game's imploding. It just means that, people, we don't want to say the R word, recession, because that'd be bad. That's the bad word. But if that's what is the case, less people are buying things, and so the market is going to have them cost less and less, so they will sell. I mean, we've seen it happen. So I think market corrections from the last 2 years, have been unbelievably successful, and those good trains don't last forever.
Yeah, I would need to read this in more detail. I have not read this blog, and it is dense.
Yeah.
My initial takeaway is, well, the first thing is I don't know anything about this writer. This could be another think piece from another like politically active blog writer, and we've seen those in Magic from time to time. I don't want to cast aspersions. I don't necessarily have an opinion on whoever wrote this, but I don't have enough time to read this right now to give a balanced opinion. With that said, I do think that the expected value of a Magic the Gathering pack from the average standard set has probably gone down in relative value pretty consistently since I started playing. And the reason for that, maybe not since I started playing, at least the last 10 years. And the reason for that is because there's so many more Magic cards now. Not everything is playable forever. When things cycle out of standard, when things get outclassed by new cards or are outclassed by old cards, there's just more competition. It's literally a numbers game of, sure, this set is as big as the last set, but there are 500 more cards for it to compete with than the last set was. So, like, I understand the concern. I don't think the sky is falling in this particular sense.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about like the sale of singles, right? Another thing to think of is just not just the R word, but also the this past year has had more products than any of the other years, and the last 2 years have really ramped things up as far as new products. So as you mentioned earlier, Magic players only have so many dollars in their pocket. They can allocate that to buying singles, or they can allocate it to the 40K decks and the new thing and the Unfinity and this and that. And as the amount of products that are released are trying to take those dollars from the community, then there's going to be less people trying to buy singles, which will ultimately lower the price of those singles. So it could be just like a kind of combination of all of those things.
And some of it, I think there's a power level bit in there, right? If some old, expensive card is basically replaced with a newer card that does it at a better rate or whatever, is that going to affect the value? Absolutely. Are the people who bet big on stupid reserve list cards, like, not the greatest bet in the world. But if you, as long as you do it, smartly, you can still work in this market. You know what I mean? Like, again, it's just buy, sell, high, low. Demand and supply. It's as classic as they get. Either way, ended here on a fun note, silly note from Andrew Brown, who works at Wizards, notes that in 2023 there will be a vanilla creature in Standard. It's been so long. This is news.
Yeah. So this is going on 2 years that we haven't had a vanilla creature.
Jeez.
Or no. A year since it was in Standard, 2 years since one was printed.
Right. I think there was one at some point, like
there were two in Strixhaven.
Strixhaven, okay.
Can you name the two in Strixhaven? It was a colorless and a white for a 1/4 spirit cat, I think, called Ageless Guardian.
Okay.
And then there was a 2/4 for 2 and a green crocodile. I forget the name of.
Both not great, but it is
they were
cute.
Fine in draft.
It's fine, but it was supposed to be a combination that has never been printed before. And for vanilla,
a power toughness combo or a power toughness casting cost combo.
The power toughness combo, as I understand it, will be unique.
Interesting,
right?
It's never been printed before.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So
what are we missing? We need a -2/-2.
Like we've never had a 2/9, for example.
Okay.
Or a 4/8. I mean, like there's just some weird little numbers that we've just never had.
Some strange ones in there.
But we'll see.
Could have a 9/0, like Force of Savagery.
We've not had a 6/9. Just saying. Giggity.
Great.
That's all I'm saying.
Good for them.
So
I'm proud of them.
Let's move on to something silly. Speaking of silliness. in going infinite. We don't get to go infinite very often, but there's something cool here this week. Some of those who are involved in the Color Pie, what do they call it? The Color Pie Council or what have you?
Yep.
Megan Smith had spoken about they haven't done a new heroic intervention in a while, given indestructible and hexproof is green, but they've taken away the ability for green to save its whole board. That ability is now firmly in white, and I thought that was really interesting.
Huh. So the ability. So obviously, I'm a huge fan of things like Ghostway and Teferi's Protection and things like that, but that isn't indestructible. That's blinking. So where does the card Heroic Intervention not have a color identity anymore? Let me rephrase that.
You'd argue it's white now, right? That's what it's saying.
The text for Heroic Intervention could now be printed on a white card?
Sounds like it.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's
it's
very
like
interesting.
Something the Unbreakable, right? Formation card. It gives like +1/+1 counters.
From Ravnica. Yeah.
Unbreakable Formation.
Unbreakable Formation.
Yeah.
Holy smokes, that's another big donation. Holy.
Yes, thank you, Mana Traders, for $250. That was incredible.
Oh my God.
Thank you all so much. We do appreciate it.
You're so nice.
Yeah, you guys are great. So yeah, I mean, big EDH staples that are out for a quick reference. Beast Within. Green doesn't destroy creatures this way. They don't get harmonizing anymore. Heroic Intervention. Beast Whisperer. Drawing for casting creatures benefits chaining cheap creatures rather than big ones.
Right.
Interesting. And Toski, as Coastal Piracy is blue. Toski was always a weird one. Toski was always like,
Toski is a weird one.
Really?
But they gave that to Edric Spymaster of Trest, but that was a blue-green card. So it made sense that your mana elves could get you damage. The one that is that's interesting, Beast Within became Generous Gift.
Right.
So I'm okay with that one.
And Heroic
Beast Whisperer is so interesting, though. The fact that they don't want the Glimpse of Nature ability in green is very interesting. Maybe it goes in white.
It makes more sense in white, honestly.
We've got things like Mentor of the Meek and Welcoming Vampire and stuff. That's interesting. Cool.
I like white. I'm glad if white gets anything. Sorry, green.
Yeah. If they just color shifted Beast Whisperer into white, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah. That would be and Heroic Intervention is a hugely, powerful, popular, expensive card that even if, as we know, this is like a color pride break now and they won't sort of do that anymore, they're still going to reprint it just like they reprint Beast Whisperer and things. It's just that ultimately in terms of modern design philosophies for the colors, the Council of Colors, thanks everybody in chat, that's how that works now. So that's kind of neat.
That's really interesting. Are there any other current color identities that you can think of that don't belong in their current color identity, in your opinion? Or that could be in another color identity, per se. The one that I sometimes point to is that red gets damage doubling and tripling or addition. And I think that there are certain cases where that could be black or green.
I was going to say green would be really interesting.
Yeah, green from creature sources, right? Like if you had a Torbrand equivalent that only added damage to creature sources, I think that would be pretty cool.
Well, they have cards. They have the enchantment that doubles toughness and power on combat step. What's that card?
That's true. Unnatural growth.
Yeah,
I got the name of a card. Oh my God!
Good job,
ladies and gentlemen. We have witnessed history now. Moving on here to
love it,
to some splash damage as things, some splash damage, if you will, because that still has a typo and I think it's adorable.
Splash damage.
All right, so Dungeons and Dragons, their new license is a lot. I'll put a link here in the chat. The link is in the show notes here for the Gizmodo article, where this wonderful person had written about how they are changing the OGL, the Open Gaming License, from whatever came out in like 2000 or something, 2000, early 2000s, to something brand new with all sorts of different crazy things. Oh yeah, so the OGL version 1.0, originally published in 2000. This has basically provided a whole market for people to take the system and run with it. And a lot of things are built on the back of it. And so, Ruben, can you tell me a little bit? This kind of has to do with the system resource document and sort of how that works with other games. Now, does Pathfinder, do they use the system resource document or an old version or their own version?
No, they use their own version.
Okay.
To answer, okay.
And that's the core.
Do you want me to go into the history of the difference between Pathfinder and D&D real quick? Or do you
Cliff Notes this, man. Give us the cliffs.
Cliff Notes.
Here we go.
So, Gary Gygax, Peter Atkinson, and all the rest of those early folks invented Dungeons & Dragons sometime in the 70s near Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. They played that version of their game for some amount of time before they were like, these original rules are kind of outdated. We need a new edition. We need a better version here. They made Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Then they played that for a little while and we're like, we could do another update. Then they made second edition. And somewhere around second edition, there was a bit of a rift. There was a bit of a schism, not unlike a religion schism, where there was a party of people that wanted to be more grindy, more numbers, more stats, more detail, and there was a group of people that wanted to be less stats or keep the same amount of stats, and that's where the divergence split. And you had Dungeons and Dragons 3rd edition, which went off in the less detail direction, and Pathfinder 1st edition, which went off in the more detail direction. The games look very similar still. It's not like the DNA is still 95% the same. And so those, when you can definitely scratch the VIN numbers off of a D&D adventure and play a Pathfinder version of it, or scratch the VIN numbers off of a Pathfinder adventure and play a D&D version of it. Spoiler alert, when Critical Role started, the world's most popular game, they currently are online, I believe. They have about 30,000 live viewers right now. They were a Pathfinder game. They were a Pathfinder home game. And they made a deal basically with Wizards that said, we want to do a stream show. Well, you need to use 5th edition. 5th edition had been shiny and new at the time, so then they'd come out with that. That's the difference between the two. So you can scratch the VIN numbers off of any D&D adventure and play a Pathfinder version of it, and vice versa. All of that is to say that the open gaming license that Wizards of the Coast has basically said if you make third-party stuff, you could benefit from it. And there was a very detailed system of, your designs in concert with our game could let you do that. I have my own original world, but I want to use 5th edition rules. I want to use 5th edition rules and the Forgotten Realms, right? There were different rule sets for different things. And basically, these licenses were ingrained into the culture and minds of people as 5th edition grew and has become the biggest and most powerful of the editions and most popular. And now they're changing the license because of a problem that we've been discussing. How do you monetize Dungeons and Dragons as Wizards of the Coast? All you really need is a rule book. You don't need much. You don't sell dice. You don't need to buy minis. How do you monetize it? So the folks at Wizards and the folks at Hasbro were like, well, the way you monetize it is you make proprietary the rules. You make proprietary the stories and things like that. And so the OGL changes came out and were very clearly from like C-suite decisions, and they were met with a wave of anger, not just on social media, but from within their own company. It was a lot.
It notes here that the OG license was 900 words long, and the new one is 9,000.
Yeah.
Also addresses new technologies like blockchains and NFTs, and they explicitly know that the company may terminate the agreement if a third party publishes material that's blatantly racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, bigoted, and so on. There's other things that do things like letting Wizards use any of their sort of IP, any of their works as they see fit, which I thought was interesting. The main sort of the sticking point, the thing that's going to make Wizards money is that if your third-party project makes over $750,000, the first dollar you get after that $750K, you'll have to pay 20% if it's crowdfunded on Kickstarter, or 25% if it's crowdfunded elsewhere, and or I think just on a different platform. And or they can have unique agreements with you because you do so much business. I don't know if that means good. I don't know if that means bad, as in they get more percentage or less percentage. I have no idea.
Only a side note, I'm curious, does that 750,000, because it's not like a huge number for big business. I'm wondering if is that after or after like costs?
No, that's everything.
I think that's
because I imagine producing some of these products cost a couple $100,000.
Oh yeah. And they noted that it's the entire amount of the project. For example, like a Kickstarter project. So if you made $800,000 in your Kickstarter project, that $50,000 would need a royalty payment of 20% of that to be paid. So that's what 10%. That's 10K. Doing that math correctly. So yeah, you had to pay. You have to pay the man after that point, and that's how Wizards is under monetizing D&D. They're like, well, we'll just make royalty rates for these super huge outfits, but the thing is, at least in my experience, it's the super huge outfits that can fight you the hardest in terms of is this okay? Is this legal? Do we go to the courts over this type of stuff? I don't know.
I like that they did it this way as opposed to trying to nickel and dime the small creators, because the small creators on DM's Guild, these people who are making less than $750,000 products, right? They're the lifeblood of the thriving community. You don't have the community that you have with Dungeons and Dragons if you wrest control of all of these elements away from them. They will simply move to another game, or they will write it agnostic of rules. Like, they will come out with an adventure that says, this story has no setting that I can speak to, and also no specific numbers of dice. You can put any system here. And like very tongue-in-cheek, write it in such a way that has nothing to do with D&D, which hurts D&D more and also pisses off your fans. So the way going after the bigger fish makes more sense in the long run anyway.
Yeah, Wizards, they get the right to use any of the content that the licensees create, whether commercial or non-commercial, which I thought was kind of interesting. And again, this completely overwrites the old agreement, and this kind of is just like, this is happening now and is a thing. There's just a ton of stuff in here. We're not lawyers. I don't represent any particular D&D printing outfit, so I got nothing other than from the outside. This looks like you're going to start fighting about money. And when you fight about money, it usually gets pretty ugly pretty fast. Just in my experience. I
don't know if the average, if you write for DM's Guild, then you might start fighting about money. Like, there's not a ton of creators who make enough money to have to worry about this.
Right. This is mainly for the big fish. This is for the big Kickstarters, the big publishing houses. How are they going to react to this?
Yeah. And that'll be interesting. And I think that it makes sense for them to update this. They hadn't updated it in 22 years. So an update was coming. It is jarring to see it be 9,000 words instead of 900. It is jarring to see some of these changes, but I'm also not a lawyer, so I don't know how cutthroat it is.
So the last bit on our splash damage here I thought was interesting is that Hearthstone, the viewership for Hearthstone World Championships 2022 was bad. And to give you an idea of how bad, in 2016, over 328,000 people watched the event. And in 2022, 21,000 people watched the event. So that's a lot. That's a 90% plus collapse in viewership. And Arena has also seen some amount of decline. Nerd Girl, how do you feel about these dropping numbers?
Well, the Hearthstone one is, who's to say? They might not have put the money into the advertising to promote the thing like they did before. They might not have put money into embedding their streams into things like Wizards did for the first event. Remember that 150,000 people that were watching? And then we went down to like, what, 6K or something like that in the next event? Because they didn't dump hundreds of thousands of dollars into embedding it onto every gaming site in the history of ever. So, yeah, I mean, I don't take as much... I'm not as worried about the health of Hearthstone because of those two drastic numbers. But Twitch overall is having a lower viewership at this time of the year. Magic has seen its lowest in the last couple of months. I think 5 months have been the lowest overall viewed, like streamed minutes watched since before Arena came out. Right? We're starting to get down to like Moto only numbers.
Wow. Back
when like Magic on Twitch was like almost nothing for streamers, and that's kind of it. So we're dipping back down to that. Not quite there yet, but I mean, I'm hoping it turns around, but it is just also a trend we're seeing all across Twitch.
Was this streamed on Twitch?
That's a good question. Jim Davis. Hey, Jim. Just noted that didn't Blizzard move Hearthstone off of Twitch and onto YouTube?
That's what I thought I saw.
So
that would also explain a big drop in numbers.
Yeah.
I did hear about that from one of the content creators as well.
And maybe they got paid on YouTube by it. I don't know. Who knows? But, I do think there is a certain amount of like, I don't know. Hearthstone just doesn't kind of have that,
YouTube became the main platform for the tournament. So, okay, that less sky is falling, more misstep,
more advertising, pointing people that way. New platform, different area or whatever to look. But the game, as far as I can tell, is still chugging along and still has its own little, we just talked to Brian Kibler about its own recent controversy with the new frames or whatever on those cards, those specialty cards or something.
Yeah, not that Blizzard has ever had any controversies.
It's important to have random drama in your card game.
Get those clicks up.
Yeah, I mean, Marvel Snap is going through its own, I can't ever collect all the cards, bit over and over. So
sure,
we'll see. All right, let's move on here. Let's turn the corner to the finisher. Jeffrey Palmer of Living Cards MTG posted his 200th and final edition of his long-running Twitter series, I Photoshopped Paddington Bear into a Magic card until I don't, on New Year's Eve. Now, it's sad to see the series end, but tell me, what beloved character are you excited to see come to Magic next, Ruben?
Well, with the success of Knives Out and Glass Onion, I'm excited to see Benoit Blanc in the background of future copies of Murder, Frantic Search, and of course, because it's such a big hit for Netflix, and Chill.
Heyo, Nerd Girl?
All right. Well, I love Avatar: The Last Airbender universe. I love the Avatar: The Last Airbender universe. I love Aang and Korra and Turtle Ducks and all the rest. I'm so excited for future cameos, unless it's from Fire Lord Ozai, because that guy can F off.
Wow. Goodness. Well, speaking of Avatar, call me basic, but I loved the new Blue People Avatar. James Cameron does not miss. So I'm excited for Magic the Gathering to the Way of Water, where everything costs $1 billion. But don't worry, Magic fans, if you can't afford it, not every product's for you. Not all of them are. Not all movies and not all products, let me tell you. And that ends the live episode of Magic Mike's. Thanks for joining us here to discuss all things Magic. Thank you, Nerd Girl.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you, Ruben.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Here we go. We're going to move on here to our final slide. I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsor, Alter Sleeves, my co-host, MTG Nerd Girl, and Ruben Bresser. You guys for watching and listening. I hope you support us at patreon.com/magicmics. Please follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe to everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online in our Discord, twitch.tv at Magic Mics, on Twitter at Magic Mics Cast, our Magic Mics subreddit, and like the Magic Mics page on Facebook. Or join us here next week, same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mics. Good night, everybody.